For those of you who've known over the years of always having to give the finger, the thumb back there, I'm happy to have this now. Now, let's see. Let me open this up. And okay, do we have a connection? I feel a connection with you, Crystal. Ah, yes. So while she's getting that up, I wanted to ask anybody, do we have any wanderers out there? Any wanderers this summer? Where have you wandered to? Just call out some places. Michigan. Hawaii, did I hear? Oh, nice. Colorado? Okay, great. So we've got, where else? Anybody over here wander? Park City. That's right, where the SOAR conference is. And where? I have not heard of Coon Hollow. Interesting. Sounds like an interesting place. Where else? Somebody said Sacramento? That's a place to wander to as well. I like that. You can always wander in your dreams. Well, I'd like to invite you today to just imagine that we're all wandering on a journey called life. Can you kind of get that? Some of you might feel like you're stuck in the same spot, just sitting on your luggage, waiting for any vehicle at all to come along and give you a ride. Some of you might feel like you're running as fast as you can and you're not quite sure if you're running towards something or fleeing something, but you realize you're missing a whole lot on what's going on around you. Some of you might feel like you're being dragged, kicking and screaming while yelling, "I didn't sign up for this." Any of those? I know I have at times. And so today, I just want you to kick back and relax and wonder about all the wanderings of your life. Whatever you're doing on this journey, because we all have different paths that we're taking. Our book of the month is called The Right Questions by Debbie Ford. And in it, she states, we alter the direction of our lives by the questions we ask. Think about it. Where am I going? What am I doing here? What am I doing up here? I've asked myself that quite a few times. And today in my talk, I do have a lot of questions for you, but not a lot of answers. And that's deliberate, because I believe that each and every one of you has your own answers. And the more that you get into that aligned state, the more likely you are to hear what they are. Now, I've revamped a talk today that I did when I first came here 3 years ago because I wanted to share some of the messages in it. However, I trust that you, even if you were there back then, you will receive a different message because I know that the talk is a little different, you're a little different, and the speaker's also a little different. So about 30 years ago, 35 maybe, I had a dream that I wanted to wander the world, just like, if you can see the world map up there, it was kind of her. And yet, I knew that it was a ridiculous dream, or so I felt, because I wanted to do it all in one loop, taking, maybe about 7 months, and I wanted to interview people on what made them happy, and where they felt their passions were, and if they were living them, and if not, why? Well, I had a pretty big list of excuses about why I couldn't do it. And as my excuses got shorter and shorter on the list, finally one excuse went off to college, and I broke up with another excuse. Then I realized it was just me looking at this journey, this path, this wandering that I wanted to do. Well, my mother told me all the ways that I could probably die if I did this journey. And so once again, it was having to really get clear on what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. Okay, let's try this puppy out. And then I read this quote by Aeneas Nin. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk that it took to blossom. And I want you to think of what you're holding back on, because this quote really resonated with me. And I realized I was playing small. I was stuck in this bud, and I was feeling uncomfortable. I'd outgrown my life, and I wanted to move forward. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and listen to the signs. So what are you listening to? Reverend Christine did a beautiful meditation where she talked about the heart and the mind coming together. Are you listening to your heart? I saw this cloud formation when I went out on the day of really determined that I was going to move forward on my journey. But also right around that time, I found out that I had breast cancer. And so I quickly went back into the state of, this is not what I signed up for. Why me? I went into this victim mode of thinking. But then, remembering my teaching, I knew that I could move forward. And I did the work that needed to be done, and about 3 weeks after my last treatment, I took off on my journey. So sometimes you have to ask, can you let go? Can you let go of your comfort zone? Can you let go of loved ones that might be, also can you let go of the opinions of loved ones about what you're doing on your journey? Think about what it is that you need to release in order to move on. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. When I let go of what I have, I receive what I need. The Tao Te Ching. This also spoke to me deeply because I saw that I was kind of beginning my journey, and I envisioned being Jane, and I was swinging from vine to vine through the jungle. And I knew that I had to let go of the last vine in order to grab onto the next one. And it was a whole trust process. So I want to ask you, what support vines do you have in place? Are you ready to let go of one and just trust that the other one's going to appear? So my vines, one of them were my family. I had another sister in Hawaii, and I got to go there and just continue a little bit more of the healing process on my first stop, and her wonderful children were there to just remind me that I also was a human being, not just a human doing. Don't just do something, sit there. So think about times in your life where you're ready to race forward, but you have to remember to slow down. Feel the sand beneath your feet, for those of you who went to Hawaii. And if you don't stop long enough, you miss the rainbows in front of you. Now, this was one of my first teachers on my journey. Can you see without your eyes? Is the question I pose to you. He was a former Balinese dancer, and he was totally blind. But he could feel and sense so much around him with all his other senses. And he taught me to not only listen to my ears, well, I have to listen through my ears, but to pick up on all these other qualities just by sensing it and also feeling it in your heart. Get that intuition to know which direction to take, when to go forward, when to step back. He always seemed to know when Lisa from California was around. He said I had an accent. I can't hear accents of Californians, but prepare your mind to receive the best that life has to offer. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, had this right when he said that we have to have that receptive state, that mental mold, if you will. So how are you creating yours? Do you meditate? Do you do affirmations? Do you visualize? Do you imagine? What are your rituals? Do you have rituals that prepare you for your day or deplete energy from your day? I was in Bali where I went up to these 10,000-year-old springs, and I thought, wow, this will be a cool ritual. I can go and get immersed in this holy water, and I was so excited about it because I just felt it wash over me, and I felt it just kind of cleansing all my fears, releasing any cancer. I had this whole powerful experience with the water. And so after I got out, I just felt invigorated. I felt now I can continue on my journey and really step into all these different things. Well, here's another one of my teachers. What do you fear? This guy lived about 20 feet up above my guest house. And I assume it was a he was a really big spider. He was about the size of my hand. And I kind of had a fear of big spiders. And so as I'd walk by him every day, I'd say, I am so glad you live outside up there in that tree. And I'd, bless him in his own right. And so you can imagine my surprise when I came home from my holy springs that night to see him right next to my toilet inside my guest house. It was not a good match. So I opened the door and I tried to escort him out. He didn't want to go. And after a couple little dances we did together of trying to get him out, he eventually came running right at my bare feet. I jumped back to get away from him. I ended up slipping on this wet tile floor. I went flying up. I came down, landed on my head, and hit my hip on the step on the way down. And when I opened my eyes, my arm was literally touching the spider's legs. I was looking eye to eye with him. He had little red beady eyes. I will never forget that. And I remember mumbling something like, "You can have the bathroom, just leave me alone." So I managed to hobble back onto my bed, and I looked in the mirror, and there, this huge goose egg was sticking out from my forehead. And I looked down, and there was a bone protruding from my hip. Yeah, a little more painful than I realized. So I, once again, went back into that victim mold. I didn't sign up for this. Why me? And after a few deep breaths and being open to the lesson of it, or whatever was in it for me, I had these wonderful people come and help get me where I needed to be on the next stage of my journey, because I had a flight to catch. And I was able to begin healing a little from that once I found out that it wasn't a broken hip. Now, I was in northern Thailand. I want to ask you, do you believe in survival of the fittest? There above my guest house on the wall, I noticed one morning National Geographic being played out in all its forms. And here, I don't know if you could tell, but there is let me try and use I have a little laser light on here too. Anyway, there's a snake that is wrapped around a gecko's body. And here's the gecko, and here's the snake. Now, they were kind of in this wrestling match because the snake, as I said, had wrapped itself around, but it couldn't swallow the gecko because the gecko had bit the snake's neck. Pretty clever. If you're ever in that situation, remember, bite the snake's neck. So they were just kind of in this holding pattern, and then eventually the snake started to get the upper hand, or the upper tail, as it were, as there's just 2 feet sticking out. And so after a while, we just kind of thought it was history for the gecko. Well, right after I took this picture, a Thai man who was a former Buddhist monk, we found out, he came along with a long broom handle. He pulled the snake off the wall, and he proceeded to squish the gecko right out of the snake's body. And we saw him then take the still wriggling snake and toss it off into the jungle. We all looked at the gecko, and the gecko shook itself and then scurried off into the jungle as well, I guess to be continued. So seeing this, it made me feel like sometimes when you don't know how you're going to get out of a situation, when all you can see is the inside of a snake's belly, and you just feel overwhelmed by life. That's how I was feeling. I couldn't walk very well, and I thought, how am I going to continue the next 6 months when I'm hobbling? And I just felt overwhelmed. But then when I saw how divine intervention in the form of a broom handle came and got this gecko to an experience that he could not see coming. Sometimes we have to trust the process, that even though we don't see how we're going to get out of something, that the universe does have a higher plan. The universe has techniques that we have never considered before to get us where we need to be. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. How do you react to change in your life? Do you go on kicking and screaming? Or can you embrace it and say, what is in here for me? What is the lesson, the gift? And so I thought, it's not what happens to me, it's how I react to it. It wasn't the spider that really hurt me, it was my reaction to the spider. Now, these two little guys were my other teachers. They were little orphans that lived just a few blocks from my guest house in Thailand. And I don't know if you see the one on the right, but he's got a little gecko in his mouth, a stuffed gecko, a little toy, and I thought that was very eerie to see. Anyway, as I said, they were orphans, and they had to respond to change in a way that babies shouldn't have to do. But they were true teachers for me and gifts because I couldn't speak much Thai. They couldn't speak much Thai. I couldn't walk very well, and they could barely walk. So together we crawled around together and laughed and played and healed together. And so it was a wonderful experience that I would not have had I not had to slow down. Do you have the wonder of a child? I saw some of you children out here the last time I did my talk, and you were tossing balloons around, and you had that joyful laughter, but oftentimes we forget about that. And due to having to delay my journey, I was able to teach at this little Buddhist school for a while. And the children were so eager to learn. They didn't care that they didn't have the best conditions. They didn't have desks. But they had that learning, that eagerness, that desire to move forward in life. Do you let yourself laugh? The kindergartners were one of my biggest teachers as well. They loved to laugh, and especially at me. They thought I was doing all these silly things all the time. And they would remind me to lighten up. So can you lighten up and laugh at yourself? I know that I would have cried had I not been able to laugh. I was being moved up from Bali to Thailand in a wheelchair at the airport. And this Thai man was there, and he couldn't speak any English, really, and I couldn't speak Thai, but I was so happy I remembered how to thank him in Thai. So I kept on saying thank you for the 2.5 hours that he was wheeling me around the airport. Well, I realized I really didn't remember Thai after all. I was saying hello to him over and over. I knew they sounded similar, but I just got him. He probably thought I had more of a head injury than a hip injury. He was very understanding. Can you coexist? This is from Cambodia, and when I went on there, I was impressed to see that this tree knew that it wanted to grow up in life. It didn't matter that there was a 900-year-old temple blocking its path. It learned how to grow around it. And together, they were far more beautiful than either one of them would have been separately. I think our world could learn a lesson from that now. Can you take a leap of faith when it's the only available transportation? Are you stuck in getting someplace quickly? Or can you allow the fact that maybe even if you're in a traffic jam with tuk-tuks and motorcycles and you have no idea how the chaos is all going to get you down the road, but you can trust the process? And so I knew that we weren't going fast, but we were moving in the direction we needed to be. And so too on my bicycle. I was now in India, and I rode through this little village, often terrified because they had snakes dangling from trees at night. And I had my little headlamp that used to go out and fade quite often, despite the batteries. And so I had to trust that I didn't need to know how to get down the entire path. I just needed to get down the next 10 feet. 10 feet at a time. Sometimes that's all we can do. What jewels are you discovering? Can you take that risk to go off the beaten path and find something out of your comfort zone? As I said, I had fears of going to India on my own. And I did go off the beaten path, and I found this wonderful little village called Oroville. Not Oroville, like up north, but your aura. And there they had this beautiful temple. They didn't call it a temple, but that's the easiest way of explaining it, where you could go in and focus, and you could go in and just meditate. And it was such a gift to me at this part of my journey. What forms do they show up as, meaning the jewels in your life? Are you open to unexpected gifts in the form of people and visitors that you might not normally get to know? This is Wachella, and she was the guest house worker that lived where I was, and she was an incredible help to me because I had moved into this little thatched hut. But what I didn't know is that the thatched hut was really occupied by a bat. And Wachella would come in every day and escort the bat out with her broom. Brooms really come in handy. And I would go in there, and I found that I drew on the courage that I had already mustered from my previous experience to not get so caught up in my current conditions. This is from the book, The Right Questions. Debbie Ford said, "Where is my faith right now? Is my faith in my fears? Do I have faith that I will be guided to the circumstances that will give me exactly what I need?" And I think if we can get to that point, that there's more going on than meets the eye, and we just have to have that inner knowing, that inner faith that we're going to be okay. What do you surround yourself in? Do you surround yourself in fear? Or do you surround yourself kind of in a protective white light? I know that I would watch the spiders crawl across this wall as I huddled under my little mosquito net, and I'd watch the bat circle above me. And I pictured that my mosquito net was made out of this powerful Wonder Woman material. So not only did I have my mental white light, but I had my new firmed up mosquito net that I knew would get me through the small time that I was there. Are you allowing new vines? Are you open to unexpected gifts and friends along the way? This Indian family took me in, and they blessed my journey immensely by teaching me how to cook Indian food, and I got to hang out with another little child who also taught me so much about laughter and life. What do you walk towards? Do you go towards the light and what you want? Or are you just looking back at what you don't want and complaining? One little tip too in India, if you want to get across the street alive, I encourage you to be accompanied by a herd of cows. I always felt safer because I just follow the cows and go toward the light. Can you let yourself be pampered? Sometimes we think that we just need to be tough all the time and serious. And when I went on to see my college friend in northern Italy, and he was there with his partner, they were truly these incredible beings who pampered me with great Italian food, fresh cheeses, all these wonderful things that I didn't normally get to experience. Can you face your shadow self? Here at the Berlin Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, I was struck as I read about all the atrocities of that area. And I had to ask myself, where have I been less than kind? Where have I turned away from those who need my help? Where have I looked a blind eye when I should have spoken up? What messages move you? At Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam, I was touched by walking around and reading all these messages she had along the wall saying how she wanted to be a published author someday and read by millions. She wrote, "Everyone has inside of him a piece of good news. The good news is that you don't know how great you can be, how much you can love, what you can accomplish, and what your potential is." As sad as her life story went, I wonder if we would be reading Anne Frank today had conditions not played out the way they had. Where do you bring peace? In front of the Brandenburg Gate, they had a meditation circle once a week. And I was so impressed that they brought this energy of peace and love to this place that had had so much upheaval during World War II. So what do you bring peace to in your own life? Do you bring peace to challenging people that you interact with? Do you bring peace to work conditions? Do you bring peace to family reunions where maybe peace needs to be focused upon? Do you see barriers or opportunities? As my journey was coming closer to an end, I was able to look back and realize that all the things that I had labeled bad were really gifts in disguise. That they weren't barriers, but they took me up to a higher place of seeing, a higher perspective where I could see how they fit in to the whole. So the Swiss Alps were also a teacher. Can you recognize and celebrate your good? I was able to reunite with my son on one of my last overseas stops, who was studying in Paris. And it felt so good to just celebrate the little things in life, the journey, the reunions, and coming back together with loved ones. What is your perspective? Wayne Dyer says, when you live on a round planet, there's no choosing sides. I found this very powerful because when you look above our planet, you don't see borders or walls or countries. You just see this beautiful color and water. And I began to think about how I had interviewed over several dozen people on my journey. And I found that we had so much more in common than we did our differences. They wanted to be happy and healthy. They wanted to raise a healthy family. They wanted to follow their passions. Are you lost or just exploring? I found this park in the middle of the country that I stopped at. And so despite how you might answer this question, I want you to remember that you can never really be lost because you're always on this path provided by your divine source. Divine guidance is always leading you to the next right step. And the path is laid out before you. You cannot really ever get off your path despite how conditions seem. Enjoy the journey and keep wandering with wonder in your soul. Keep that childlike innocence as you dance along your path. Thank you for listening. Namaste. And now, thank you.